Coming up on this episode of The Doctor's Farmacy.
Can we provide the optimal level of not only the nutrients our body needs, but also the phytochemicals from diet alone? And the simple answer is no, it's impossible because our food supply has changed so much.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Mark. As a functional medicine doctor looking at hormones, organic acids, nutrient levels, inflammatory factors, gut bacteria, and so many other internal variables, it helps me find the most effective path to health and healing for my patients. But such extensive testing can be very complicated and time-consuming for both the practitioner, somebody like me, and our patients. But lab ordering became very quick and painless since I started using Rupa Health. I can order, track, and get results from over 35 different lab companies within a few clicks in one lab portal. And this means one invoice for all labs paid online upfront. Plus, patients get practitioner pricing and receive full patient support through easier personalized collection instructions, automated follow-up, super bills, and answers to testing questions, and so much more. And best of all, it's free for practitioners. So sign up free today. You can find out more information by going to rupahealth.com. That's RUPA health.com. I've been tracking my glucose with the help of Levels for several years now, and it's become a crucial part of optimizing my health and my diet. One of the keys to an optimized diet is monitoring your glucose intake, otherwise known as sugar. Poor glucose control is tied to all kinds of issues like weight gain, fatigue, diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart disease, and stroke. But it can be hard to know exactly how much glucose you're getting in your diet. That's where Levels comes in. They show you how food affects your health in real time through continuous glucose monitors. In fact, I remember I was eating out with a friend once, and although we ordered a really healthy meal, I way overate. And when I checked my blood sugar levels, they were off the charts high. So that's when I learned the importance of monitoring my food intake and not going overboard, something I would have known without Levels' help. And right now, you can join Levels and receive an additional 2 months free on your annual membership when you order at levels.link/Hyman. That's levels, Levels, .link, LINK/Hyman. Your first purchase will include a 1-month supply of continuous glucose monitors and a 12-month software membership. And again, if you go to levels.link/Hyman, Levels is offering an additional 2 months of their annual membership free. Now let's get back to this week's episode of The Doctor's Farmacy.
Hi, this is Lauren Feehan, one of the producers of the Doctor's Farmacy podcast. It might be easy to assume that if you're eating a whole foods diet rich in plants, you're getting enough nutrients to not need supplements. And while compared to a processed diet that may be true, the reality is that you might not be getting all the nutrition you'd expect from one carrot to the next. In today's episode, we feature 4 conversations from the Doctor's Farmacy on the connections between soil health, nutrient density in plants, and human health. Dr. Hyman speaks with Dr. Michael Murray about our compromised food supply and why we need supplements, with Fred Provenza about how the microbiome of the soil is determined by plants, with Dan Kittredge about how pesticides and fertilizers also destroy the soil, and with Jeff Tkach about the value of organic foods. Let's dive in.
The question is, I think, can we provide the optimal level of not only the nutrients our body needs, but also the phytochemicals from diet alone? And the simple answer is no, it's impossible because our food supply has changed so much, and it's no longer nutrient rich, it's no longer phytochemical rich, and the type of chemicals in phytochemicals in our food is changed, and it's changed by modern farming. And I'm sure you've had many experts talk about this, but if we look at the flavonoids, as I said, I've loved them. If you look at the flavonoid composition of organically grown tomatoes and compare it to GMO tomatoes, it's different. The pesticides, herbicides influence the plant's production of these, like you mentioned, protective compounds. So I really think that it's important to take advantage of all these superfoods that we have available to us and all these supplements that can help promote health and longevity. And if we don't, we might be able to get by, but we're not going to be thriving. And I'd rather see people thriving than just getting by.
I agree. And in terms of, longevity, what are the things that are the kind of have-tos? I mean, there's a list a mile long. And I want to talk about your personal recommendations that you take, because I've looked at your list and it's quite extensive.
Right.
But what are sort of the have-tos, the non-negotiables that are really key, that are backed by science around what we need to take for longevity?
I think in anything you're doing in life, sports, your job, building health, you have to pay attention to the foundation. So your question is, what are the foundational supplements that promote longevity? I think you need a good high-potency multiple vitamin and mineral formula, because a deficiency of any single nutrient can have catastrophic effects on our health. Next, I do believe in the vitamin D3 research. I do think that it's critical that we have adequate vitamin D3 levels. So take enough vitamin D3 to get you in that ideal range of 60 to 80 nanograms per ml or micrograms per ml. Then next, I think these pharmaceutical grade fish oils are a great gift, because you're getting these long chain omega-3 fatty acids in a very clean form. And you have thousands of scientific studies showing the benefits of these long chain omega-3 fatty acids to our health. So taking a good high quality fish oil, getting enough of them, getting at least 1,000 milligrams combined of EPA and DHA each day, I think is a good goal. Next, I think it's important to take some sort of plant-based broad spectrum antioxidant. A good flavonoid-rich extract would be a good choice, something like a grapeseed extract or a pine bark extract in the range of 150 to 300 milligrams per day. You could take one of these enhanced versions of curcumin. That would be a good choice. Or there's so many great broad spectrum antioxidants. You could take a greens drink, just something that's rich in phytochemicals that can produce some real benefit.
It seems like the ones that you've actually listed in your personal list are the ones that seem to be for me, the most data on health and longevity, like quercetin, curcumin, green tea extracts, resveratrol, which are sort of the things that grapeseed extract, which are the things that actually are, based on the literature, the most promising.
Yeah, well, quercetin is interesting because it activates the longevity gene. Everyone's trying to, I know NMN is a big thing, but what you're doing is you're filling in a bucket that has a hole in it. There's an NMN bucket, but there's a hole in it, and so we're filling that bucket up continually by taking NMN instead of fixing that hole. Oh. That hole is related to an activity of an enzyme, and we can help heal that bucket by taking quercetin. It activates that longevity gene, and that raises the body's own NAD plus levels instead of having to take NMN. So I think
what is that longevity gene you're talking about with quercetin? Because I think that's a very important one for longevity that maybe people haven't heard of. It also seemed to be very effective in COVID and helping with the immune system. It's great in allergies and gut healing. So tell us a little bit more about the mechanism of action of quercetin, because I think it's something people hear about but may not be aware of.
Yes, this particular gene increases the expression of the enzyme that regenerates NAD+. And the NAD+ levels tend to decline as we age, and people are taking things like nicotinamide riboside or nicotinamide mononucleotide NMN to try and boost NAD+ levels. But quercetin and other flavonoids, by influencing the production of a very specific enzyme, can help regenerate that NAD+, and I think a more sustainable fashion. Otherwise, you're not addressing the underlying cause. Good medicine always involves trying to understand what's really going on in the cell and in the body and trying to repair it. And so,
do you remember the name of that enzyme?
It's naphthaquinone oxoreductase 1.
Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one. Well, we're going to put that in the show notes. It's an interesting mechanism of action. And I think that's a very insightful point. So maybe even if you took NAD or NMN or NR and you took quercetin along with it, it might help, right?
Yeah. I personally don't take NMN because I believe in the flavonoids that I'm taking.
But you're also taking a lot of other stuff. You're taking things for detoxification and mitochondria, which play a big role in aging, things to help your metabolism. So can you talk about some of those compounds that you're taking?
Oh my God. If you're looking at wanting to live longer, you've got to have plenty of energy. So you have to ask the question, well, how do I make sure my energy producing machinery is working properly? And the best way to do that is to focus on things that help your mitochondria work better. So your mitochondria are the energy producing compartments of our cell. It needs virtually all the B vitamins. It needs coenzyme Q10, and it needs protective agents around it, because basically your mitochondria are like a little mini nuclear reactor. They're producing energy, and that's what gives us life. And in that process, it's generating a lot of pro-oxidants and oxidants that can cause damage to the mitochondria as well as our cell. So there's some special compounds that protect the mitochondria. One of my favorites is called PQQ. That's short for pyroquinoline quinone. That's why we called it PQQ. I love this compound, Mark. I'm sure you've talked about it, but it's found in stardust. And you could make a claim that PQQ is the spark of life spread through the universe. Because it's absolutely essential for life. It plays a key role in mitochondrial function. It's found in our diet in very small quantities, but they're necessary. And it will someday be classified as a vitamin, similar to in quantities to like folic acid, and it is available in supplement form. It's been shown to work very well with coenzyme Q10.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, this
is it related to CoQ10? It sounds like, from the name of it, it may be, but is it different than CoQ10?
It is. It's a bit different. And every time we use this term antioxidant a lot, but there's many different antioxidants as there are musical instruments, and you need that whole band playing. But every time an antioxidant performs its function, it's called a catalytic conversion. Some antioxidants are relatively cheap, like vitamin C. It can only be used 4 times and then it's spent. PQQ, it can survive 20,000 catalytic conversions, so it makes it very special, and that's why it's really concentrated in the mitochondria, because it's a very valuable antioxidant to protect against damage during that energy production. Glutathione is another example of a key antioxidant, but PQQ is many times more powerful than even glutathione. And I don't know if anyone's talked about ergothioneine but
we do have talked about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it.
Well, ergothioneine is
before you go on about PQQ, I just want to sort of say something about it. It's one of those compounds that activates what I call one of these longevity switches. Your body has these hallmarks of aging, and then the most important one of these deregulated nutrient sensing. And I call these 4 longevity switches that regulate insulin, mTOR, sirtuins, which have to do with resveratrol and things like that, NAD. But then there's AMPK, which a lot of people are taking metformin for, but PQQ activates AMPK, which helps to really work on all the longevity pathways.
Very well said. And, that leads us to berberine too. Berberine is one of my standard supplements. It's a compound found in golden seal. And it has great research showing an ability to lower cholesterol levels, lower blood pressure, and lower blood glucose levels. If it was a drug, it'd be the biggest selling drug of all time. We're talking nearly 30 double-blind, placebo-controlled studies showing that this compound that's found in plants like golden seal and barberry and gold thread can lower cholesterol levels as well as a statin, can lower blood pressure as well as an ACE inhibitor, and can lower blood sugar levels as well as metformin.
That's impressive.
Has some other really unique effects as well, including activation of AMPK. Yes, there's a lot of compounds in nature that activate AMPK, and my whole diet is full of them. It's just amazing, all these different compounds. They all have some common features. NRF2 activation is another key anti-aging strategy. It's a non-specific call to arms by our cells to activate our antioxidant mechanisms. And it explains, one of the things that has happened in flavonoid research and some of the phytochemical research, they do test tube studies and to see what actions it might produce. And then, but those test tube studies show us what the concentration is that's required to produce those effects. And sometimes it's not possible to achieve that level of concentration. They get metabolized, they get bound to the compounds, right. But they're still active. So how are they working? And then that turns into a really interesting study, because we see more clearly as pharmacology has evolved. We've rediscovered some of these compounds that we thought were inactive because we didn't have the models to explain how they work. And what we're seeing is that many of these natural compounds activate really important cellular targets, like you mentioned the four hallmarks of aging. And cyclic AMP is certainly one of those key factors, because it not only lowers lipid levels, improves blood sugar levels, it increases the formation of mitochondria.
Yeah,
you increase the number of mitochondria, you increase the energy of a cell, you increase the energy of the cell, it works better. So. It's like, I look at it, the brain is our most metabolically active tissue. Okay. And yet many people their dimmer switch is turned to dim because they don't have the mitochondrial energy production needed to have that brain be bright and to function properly. And, it's an epidemic of mild cognitive impairment to dementia in our elderly right now, and I think helping them have more mitochondrial numbers and better mitochondrial function is the solution. And so many of the things that we look to improve mitochondrial function improve brain function as well. I started taking this product, Mark. It's from our friends at Natural Factors. It's called RegenerLife.
Yeah.
I love this product because I take a lot of pills, but this comes in a powdered form. So you got a little scoop here, and you just empty that orange powder into your glass, and you've got a great cocktail. It contains acetyl L-carnitine, CoQ10, and some other key compounds for enhanced mitochondrial function. And it's just a great way to get that dimmer switch to turn up a bit.
Yeah, I put that in my smoothie every morning. I do, actually. It's great.
Yeah.
I think it's just important to emphasize what you said earlier about these plant compounds that work on these pathways that drugs work on. So a lot of people in the longevity field are thinking about metformin and taking this diabetes drug for longevity. And there's a large trial going on now called the TAME trial, targeting aging with metformin, which is really designed to determine whether or not this is an effective longevity intervention that can reverse biological age. But what you're saying is that there are many of these compounds like berberine and other things that actually do the same or work better than these drugs. Is that true? Yeah,
yes, absolutely. And if we look at the contrast between berberine and metformin is really interesting. Metformin, by the way, was originally isolated from a plant. So conceptually, it is a natural product, and it does have a place in medicine. But I think that berberine might be a better choice. And what's interesting about both metformin and berberine is they affect the microbiome. But if you, I'm sure you've had patients that. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you've had people on metformin. What's their biggest complaint, Mark?
Digestive problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because I don't think it's affecting the microbiome in a healthy way. Berberine has phenomenal effects on the microbiome. It's a selective antibiotic. It's a pathogen-specific, disease-causing organism-specific antibiotic, and it promotes the growth of many health-promoting bacteria. One of the key ones is called Akkermansia muciniphila. This compound, or this bacteria, it works with our intestinal cells to create the mucin layer. It's given the name mucinophilia. Philia means love. It loves that mucin, and it helps improve the quality and function of that mucin. When we talk about leaky gut, we're talking about the loss of that mucin, and we're talking about a deficiency of Akkermansia mucinophilia. When we talk about diabetes, when we talk about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, when we talk about systemic inflammation caused by a leaky gut, we're talking about decreased Akkermansia mucinophilia. And berberine increases the counts of this health-promoting bacteria, helps reestablish that mucin layer, and is a very important remedy for leaky gut, diabetes, and inflammation, systemic inflammation, fatty liver disease, all these sequelae of what we know are the result of absorbing gut-derived toxins that create all these problems in our liver and our metabolism. So I think the contrast between metformin and berberine on gut health it's night and day. One, metformin, questionable benefits, maybe some harm. Berberine looks very beneficial.
Interesting. So maybe we're searching for love in the wrong places, that maybe the plant kingdom actually is a source of a lot of these compounds. And this is what I found when I wrote my book, Young Forever, that a lot of these compounds are in nature working on these pathways that we are trying to find drugs for, but they do it in a way that's kind of more in line with nature, less likely to have side effects, and potentially even more benefit.
Yeah, and what's exciting, Mark, is the best from nature is yet to come. I've had my fingers on the pulse of research for over 40 years now, and I'm telling you, with the increase in our understanding of how natural compounds work in our body, we're going to be gaining a greater appreciation. You know, one of the biggest indicators of how far we've come in that regard is looking at curcumin. So curcumin's been the subject of over 8,000 scientific investigations. Why are researchers studying curcumin? Because they're trying to find a drug that'll produce the same actions, and they haven't been able to find one. It's been intense research over 20 years, and most natural compounds exert what are called pleiotropic effects. This is unknown with traditional drugs. If we look at inflammation, like a Celebrex or an aspirin, they work on one enzyme. There are over 40 different enzymes that have been implicated in causing the cascade of events that lead to severe inflammation. Curcumin impacts all of them. It's been shown to impact every known activator of inflammation, while the drugs only work on one or two. And it's really quite interesting. I believe in the power of nature. We fall in love with technology, but I wrote a book called The Magic of Food, and my thought was, how I came up with that title was that Sir Arthur Clarke, who wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey, had a great quote. He said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And we have lost sight of where true technology lies, because, we're all amazed by our iPhone and our computers and all this technology. But the greatest technology in the universe is nature.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Mark here. I want to tell you about a new superfood that seems almost too good to be true. It has over 5,000 five-star reviews and life-changing testimonials from users, and it benefits almost every system in your body. I'm talking about Armra Colostrum. Colostrum is the first nutrition we get in life, and it contains all of the essential nutrients for our bodies to thrive. Armra harnesses this superfood to provide you with a host of research-backed health benefits like supporting nutrient absorption, stable blood sugar levels, and fat burning. It's even been shown to improve endurance and build lean muscle mass. So whether you're looking to strengthen your gut, gain increased fitness performance and recovery, or simply experience its incredible anti-aging benefits, Armra Colostrum is the real deal. And the company was founded by a like-minded physician. We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 15% off your first order. Just go to tryarmra.com/Mark and enter the code MARK to get 15% off your first order. That's TRYARMRA.com/Mark. And now, let's get back to this week's episode of The Doctor's Pharmacy.
I thought that, the microbiome of the soil was important for the plants, but the microbiome of the soil is also determined by the plants.
Yes.
And the plants in a symbiotic relationship with the soil put stuff in the soil that feeds the microbiome. And the more diversity of plants, now think about these massive millions of acres of monoculture, what that does to the soil, right? If you have hundreds of different species of plants on rangeland or farmland, that's putting information in the soil that feeds the ciliary medicine for the microbiome of the soil. And then the microbiome, in turn, helps the plants by extracting compounds from the soil that it couldn't otherwise extract. So we're seeing two phenomena here. One is, over the last 50 years, we've seen a dramatic reduction in mineral and nutrient content in plants. Even if you eat your broccoli today, it's not as nutritious as it was 50 years ago. You're up to 50% lower levels of minerals, and also a 10 to 50% reduction in phytochemicals. And it's all because we've disrupted this natural relationship between plants and soil.
Yes. And we didn't understand, right? I mean, when people starting into all this, nobody understood. And the silos that we live in, right? That we were talking about last night. So you have these ecologists that are going down this path and learning about all these things we're talking about. You have agronomists that are thinking we need yield, yield, yield. And now those worlds are coming together. How we're starting to say, look, we did this. Nobody's to blame. It was just good intentions, but we need to have a think. And then these phytochemicals, going back to the soil microbiome, they're health promoting for all those bacteria and mycorrhizae and all. It's so symbiotic and so health promoting all the way across the board. And you can't extract one from the other. They're intimately interrelated, and we're interrelated with all that, right? And we've forgotten that's so fundamental to our health. We really need to wake up to that, right? And that appreciation of how beautiful and amazing it is, for one thing, and then how important it is, fundamental for our health.
Totally. And the phytochemicals that are in these plants that have been grown in ways that feed the microbiome of the soil, that increase their nutrient density, that increase their phytochemical richness, have profound effects for our health. And they're profound effects for the animals. So I'm a doctor. You're sort of a rangeland behavioral ecologist, right? We're studying different things. It seems like, how could they come
Ecological
together?
doctor.
But it's really, when you look at it, it's exactly what's happening in human health and animal health. So we're seeing the need for massive inputs to animals to keep them growing and healthy, from feedlots using supportive nutritional support, antibiotics, certain kinds of feed. It just, and they're not that healthy. Whereas if you take a fully grass-fed finished animal or wild animal, they're eating foods all the time that are treating their bodies with medicine.
That's right.
And they're less likely to get sick, and they don't need as much support. And so the costs are way less to raise grass-fed regenerative beef than it is to feed a lot of animals. And people say, oh, it's more expensive. It turns out it's not more expensive. It turns out they gain weight in the right way. And what was fascinating to me reading your book was that some of these papers was that it was shocking to me that they could eat far less and gain the same weight, because, this is just fascinating to me, because we eat a nutrient replete diet, our bodies know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely the case. the whole notion of the nutritional wisdom of the body, of everything from the bacteria in the soil through to the plants themselves, through to the livestock and us as well. You know, I want to go back to a point too. It's about our reliance on fossil fuels, and that all these inputs that plants did naturally, now we have to make up with herbicides to protect plants in monocultures, glyphosate, and all the downstream effects of glyphosate. Plants did that naturally. They produced their own herbicides, and we didn't.
And they're called phytochemicals.
Right, and they're called phytochemicals. Then insecticides to protect plants from the insect world. Well, that's what plants did. That's
also phytochemicals.
That's what they also phytochemicals. Fertilizers, we've been talking about this symbiosis below ground. When we got rid of that, then we've got to do the fertilizer. Well, there's costs to every one of those things. And then, like you said,
and then a lot of plants, if you have a diversity of plants, they put nitrogen into the soil, so you don't have to put it in.
Right, absolutely. Nitrogen fixing plants, and then so we shot ourselves in the foot. And then there's this huge cost that we've talked about. You know, when you take into
just something occurred to me. Sorry to interrupt. Something occurred to me was just that the reason we need GMO foods is because we've depleted the plant's natural ability to defend itself by the breeding we've done. That's plants for yield and protein energy. And then go, wait a minute, these are all getting eaten and they're not thriving and they're getting sick. And we need to give them all these drugs, to keep them healthy, which is kind of silly because naturally these phytochemicals are the plant's defense mechanisms. They prevent them from UV radiation. They help treat different problems that they have with their own health. They help communicate with other plants of dangers. They have all these incredible benefits, right?
Yeah, and that's the supreme irony is now we're trying to genetically engineer back into plants all the things that they originally had. You know, so it puts the emphasis, as we were talking, on programs, and there are some in this country that are really trying to think about phytochemical richness and how do we get that back into the production system in really viable ways, so that when you go to the grocery store and you pick up the lettuce or the kale or the tomato or whatever it is, and you pick something that's phytochemically rich and you take a bite of that and every cell in your body saying, hey, this is wonderful, rather than,
Although eating broccoli from the store, even if it's organic broccoli from, a great store, if I go and pick it in my garden and eat it, I'm like, wow, what's that? Or if I eat asparagus that I buy in the store, if I eat asparagus that I go pick in my garden, I'm like, that tastes so different, right?
Absolutely.
Tastes so different.
So and that's where we would encourage everyone to, growing gardens, getting your hands in. And I talk to a lot of people anymore who haven't done that historically, but they listen to these kind of things and they start doing that. And they say, it's a spiritual kind of thing in the one sense that it connects you back with our being kind of, but then the rewards of eating, like you say, it's wonderful. How we pick it fresh and bring it in and you eat it. And then to realize what we're talking about, some of the science that's been dug into, that it actually is very, very healthy for you. And all these phytochemicals that I'll say a word too. Over my career, I was so involved with natural products chemists and ecologists and learning all these different compounds, all of them, jillions of them. And I don't worry about that anymore, Mark. I'll have to, for two reasons. One, my memory doesn't hold these things anymore, I'll be honest. But two, you realize it's so complex. I mean, plants will produce tens to hundreds to even thousands of these. Strawberry will produce 5,000 of them. So I think we can become bogged down if we try to think about, does it have resveratrol or does it have phenolics of this sort of one? Not to say there, but if you just appreciate that it's that phytochemical richness, that's really what matters. And then the miracle is at the level of the cells and organ systems in your body, your cells and body know what to do with all that. That's incredible, and you're never going to study that in a reductionist sense.
No, it's so complex, right? Because you're literally eating thousands of compounds, not just protein, fat, carbs, fiber, vitamins, and minerals, all these other compounds, and your body knows what to do with them. They regulate all these key functions. It's what I do in functional medicine when I treat patients using food as medicine. I tell people to have green tea, which helps get rid of heavy metals, or have them have broccoli, which increases their detox capacity, glutathione through the glucosinolates and sulforaphane, or whether I'm having them eat proanthocyanins from berries to increase their anti-inflammatory antioxidant capacity. So I'm thinking all the time about how do I use these, but it really never occurred to me these deep interrelationships between the plants, animals, and the soil that are driving the phytochemical richness. Yeah. And so your work has really explained how that all works and why we've sort of gotten so screwed up. So essentially we bred plants to remove these compounds, and then we have to use all these agrochemical and industrial inputs to compensate for that. And two, we built an agricultural system, a legacy of the green revolution that ended up damaging the soil in ways that we never even understood and turned it from soil to dirt. And you wrote in a paper you recently read that the green revolution helped feed billions of people, but had many unintended consequences, including loss of land and social changes in the culture because of how it affected the farmers, which from displacement of land and poverty for countless of small farmers. And in India, suicide rates are really high among farmers, even in this country. The loss of biodiversity, which we talked about, and food quality, the degradation of the land from soil erosion, and loss of minerals in the soil. Adverse effects from synthetic fertilizers on soil organisms. So when you put nitrogen on the soil, it kills the bugs in there. The pollution from fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides in the overall environment, and more salt in the soil from irrigation, and dependence on fossil fuels. So it really created a system that has so many inputs and so many changes and destructive problems that happened to the ecosystem that we've sort of stopped living in an ecological way that's supportive and sustainable, and we're now calling regenerative, which is how do we regenerate ecosystems? How do we regenerate soil? How do we regenerate the phytochemicals in plant? How do we regenerate human health? Those are all the things that people care about. And yet we've developed an agricultural system that produces a lot of food that makes people sick and kills people. I mean, just the one fact around COVID that's just staggering to me is that 63% of hospitalizations for COVID can be linked back to poor diet. The poor diet that caused diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and so forth that led to the hospitalizations.
Absolutely.
That should get everybody stopping in their tracks and going, wait a minute, if we are so susceptible to the pandemic because of our diet, and we've not only seen that in deaths and sickness, but also the loss of food security, nutrition security in so many communities during the pandemic, we've sort of got to get back on track here.
Yes, and as everything we're saying, it relates to all the organisms in the system, right? As you get rid of the phytochemical diversity and diversity of different plant species, that makes all the wild and domestic animals more susceptible to diseases as well. Huh? We're seeing it in a pandemic. It's become very real for humans, but that's the same kind of thing that happens in wild and domestic animals as well.
And it's just not just in animal agriculture, plant agriculture. Even if you're a vegetarian or vegan and you're eating plants, and if they're grown even in organic ways, they can be using killing methods in the soil. They can be doing things that actually increase biodiversity. And it's not necessarily going to solve the problem. If you're doing large monocrops of soybeans or, the new plant-based meats, you've got GMO soy going in huge monocrop cultures that are destroying the ecosystem. And we're pouring billions of pounds of, billions of pounds of glyphosate that's on soil, which is destroying the soil microbiome, which destroys our microbiome. And we're ending up having these food products that aren't what they were, and our health is really degraded as a result.
Yeah, glyphosate was originally developed as an antibiotic, right? Is to kill bacteria. So
I thought it was to clean out the lead pipes, and then they put it in the pipes, and the runoff from the pipes. They found all the plants died around where the runoff was out of the pipes.
That's part of the history of that whole thing. That's right. It wasn't deliberate, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was an unintended consequence, observation, and turned it into the herbicide it is today. Huh?
Yeah, it's crazy. So as a doctor, I understand, and as a functional medicine doctor, I understand the power of food as medicine and the power of phytochemicals and phytonutrients in plants to actually activate our health and address both the treatment and prevention of disease. That's so clear to me. And your work has really highlighted how we've lost our ability to be in right relationship with the land and with animals that will lead to more of these phytochemicals being in our diet, including not only in plants, but in animals. And we'll talk about phytochemicals in meat in a little bit. What really strikes me from your work is how we've really lost our natural wisdom of what to eat. And one of the studies that you wrote about in your book, Nourishment, which everybody should get a copy of, is this study that was done in the 1920s by a woman, I think in Canada, who took kids from an orphanage. And I don't think you can get this through an ethics committee today, but she took these kids from an orphanage and she fed them an array of foods. She offered them these foods so they could naturally select what their bodies wanted. And these kids would eat stuff that you wouldn't even think they, like, for example, a dinner might be orange juice and liver and, you know, some weird thing and brains. And so talk about the study, what was learned from it, and how as humans living in a world with a disconnection from our food supply and a disconnection from the kinds of foods that helped us maintain our nutritional wisdom, how it's led to all this chronic disease. So this study really informs a lot of the thinking about why we are all so sick and overweight.
Yes, Clara Davis was the scientist who did the studies. She was in Chicago, and I would have loved to have met Clara. I have to say, she was a petite little lady and so much on the same page. But she obviously had this belief in the nutritional wisdom of the body, but wanted to study that and see what happens. So she had 15 children that were given up for adoption or put in an orphanage. And she ran the study over a 6-year period. And they had 34 different foods that were offered seasonally, and some of the things like you mentioned. And then they simply recorded what each child ate, meal in, meal out, day. Can you imagine that amount of data?
Well, they just got to pick whatever they wanted, these kids.
Yeah, the kids could pick whatever they wanted. And they had pediatricians that were involved in that study, and they wrote papers about it, and they said they'd never seen a healthier group of kids ever in their careers. And the kids did things, and this was interesting.
So there's no nutritionist telling them what to do, no dietary guidelines giving them instructions, no nutrition facts labels with all the right stuff that kids should eat for breakfast.
And Clara made it clear. She told the people who were helping on the study, you're not to give any indication to those children of something to eat. You put it on that, you put it in front of them. And it was interesting when they first started this study. They said the kids sampled everything. Everything went into their mouth, the napkins, the silverware, anything that was on there. But given a little bit of time, each child would figure out what worked for its body. And I just love this because she said no two children ever selected the same combination of foods, and no child ever selected the same foods from day to day.
Right. But
they all selected diets that met their needs. And they knew when some of the kids would come in with deficiency symptoms, they paid particular attention to what they would select, and they would select things that they needed.
So if they're vitamin A deficient, they'll go for the liver.
That's right. That's absolutely the case. Or if they come in with rickets, they're going to go for vitamin D. Yeah. So they documented all of that. And it's just amazing to think. And we were talking about that. We did studies like that with livestock, with sheep and cattle, where we'd give them choices of foods or no choice at all. These rations that are fed in feedlots, these what are called total mixed rations, where they're designed for the average animal, and you try to make uniform groups of animals in terms of age and sex and so forth. And then you formulate a ration, you grind it and mix it up. So one group would get that in our study. The other group was simply offered the choice of the ingredients. And it was amazing to compare what they did. And that's where, going back to a point that you made, the animals that were given a choice actually ate less food.
But gained the same weight.
But they gained weight just as readily. They when people talk about finishing and you slaughter them, and we did that, and you look at their carcass characteristics, they were the same, but it cost less. It was more efficient. It cost less if you're thinking in an economic sense, because they ate less food. Here's the
you put out a buffet for them instead of giving them a set meal.
That's absolutely.
And then they got to pick from the buffet what they actually needed for their health.
And they did exactly what Clara Davis' kids did too. No two animals ever selected the same combination of foods, and they varied it from day to day to day, and we understand a lot how that works. So we don't need to go into those details, but it's amazing. And one of the most amazing things to me So you can look at different characteristics, but one thing that nutritionists like to look at is protein to energy ratio in the diet. And that varies a lot as a function of need. And so for the total mixed ration, there's a set protein to energy ratio, right? It's set by what that ration is. And when we looked at protein to energy ratio for the individual animals given choice, they were all over the place. Some were really high, some were really low. But when we averaged all those animals, they were exactly where the nutritionist had formulated the ration, but none of them were that. Do you know there was no average animal?
They had their own intelligence.
Yes.
Even a cow.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a wild elk or a buffalo.
That's right. That's right. It was still, they had not lost that. And that's a key point, because when we started our work 45 years ago, there was the notion among ruminant nutritionists that wild animals must still have this nutritional wisdom in their bodies. Otherwise, how could they be surviving? But domestic animals had lost it as a result of 10,000 years of domestication and selection. And our work just shows in the 300 papers we published over and over again, it hasn't been lost. But it's the choices that you give them, and are you giving them wholesome choices that allow that wisdom? No different from a human, right? If you're raised on an ultra processed diet and that's your choices, it's not going to work out well for you, right? But if you have all these wholesome choices and they're grown under the kind of conditions we're talking about, then that wisdom can be expressed. And the amazing thing is you don't even have to think about it. It's not something
It's amazing. We've lost all that, and we've gotten in a world where we are over consuming ultra processed foods in ways that make us the most obese nation in the world, and are staggeringly undernourished, even though we're overfed
and undernourished.
And we have significant nutritional deficiencies in this culture. Forget about phytochemicals. So I think probably 99.9% of Americans are deficient in phytochemicals, and I think less than 9% eat the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables. That is a minimum, like 5 cups is minimum, five servings, which is basically 2.5 cups. I would say people should eat more like 8 or 9 cups of fruits and vegetables a day. Right. So we've lost that, and and these compounds we're not getting, and we don't know we need, but we're so deficient in our diet, and the cravings we have and the overeating we do often is an attempt to try to replace those nutrients that we're not getting from our food. And one of the studies by Kevin Hall and some others was fascinating to me. You talked about it, which is that when given an unlimited amount of ultra processed food to eat or a whole food to eat, that the people who ate the whole foods felt satisfied on far less food. They ate 500 calories less a day. Now, that is a massive amount of calories. If you're 100 calories off for 20 years, you're going to gain 20 or 30 pounds. So 500 calories, let's say 3,500 calories, right? Which is basically a week of the calorie excess would be equivalent to a pound of weight gain a week. Excess food. So that's why we're so overweight, because we're looking for love in all the wrong places. We're looking for nutrients in nutrient depleted food. Forget about phytochemicals. Like the whole idea of phytochemicals regulating our appetite and our desire for food was something I just, didn't fully understand until I read your book. And the thing that struck me was some of the experiments you did where you help explain how flavor and nutrient needs and the animal's feeding behavior are all related. So they will find the foods that they need and will eat enough of those to meet their needs, and then they'll go eat something else. And they won't eat too much or too little. They have this natural intelligence, and that flavor is associated with these phytochemicals. So most people understand. When you eat like a wild strawberry, it's an explosion of flavor in your mouth, even though it's the size of a pea.
Yes.
If you eat a big fat strawberry you buy in the grocery store, it tastes like cardboard, and there's no real flavor there. And Dan Barber has done a lot of work around this as a chef and created a company called Row 7 Foods, where he's hybridizing plants, not GMO, but just breeding plants for flavor. He's not thinking about phytochemicals. I'm thinking as a doctor about the phytochemicals, because the phytochemicals are what give the plant the flavor. So that whole relationship between plants, even in humans and their dietary preferences, and plants and animals is something most people don't understand. So can you explain the way in which these flavor feedback loops help regulate animals' feeding behavior and how it might inform as humans what we should be eating and how we need to reclaim and listen to our own nutritional wisdom.
That's so important. And that was something that really blew my mind. I wish there's a way that we could make these come alive for people there to realize that liking for flavor is being mediated by these metabolic feedbacks, hormones, neurotransmitters, peptides, all those signals are coming from cells and organ systems as a function of their need. And so that's changing liking as a function of need. And when you're eating wholesome foods, then that's going to be in sync with what your body needs. That system can be hijacked.
Yeah.
We looked at a little video last night. I showed you of sheep, and one group of sheep had been when they ate a straw, which is not a nutritious food at all. We would put either water in one group of sheep directly into their stomach or a blast of energy. And the sheep that got the blast of energy, they love that straw, right? That's what
you give them a little maple syrup or right?
That's what the
juice,
food industry is doing with the refined carbohydrates. You get a flavor and you follow that with a blast of energy and you immediately form a really strong preference.
So we stop there. So basically what you're saying is you take straw, which is like eating processed food, right?
Cardboard,
no nutrient. You add sugar on it and they go, oh, sugar, that's good. I want energy. And they eat the straw even though it has no nutrition.
Right.
Which is what we do as humans when we eat ultra processed food. We eat fast food, which has no real nutritional value, but it has tons of energy. So they add sugar and all these flavorings to it in order for us to start craving it. So we associate the boost in energy with
the flavor of the food.
But it's actually kind of mismatched.
It is. And what we were showing is that it's that feedback. And the way you do that is to give the flavor of straw. So we would make maple flavored or apple flavored or whatever it is. And you've got this straw that's worthless. So you have to emphasize that it's not nutritionally anything. But when you follow the ingestion of that straw with nutrients in the gut, put the nutrients directly in the gut, that's the cells of work. Those nutrients are getting absorbed and cells in the organ system. Oh, this is great. And it's feeding back to make you say, oh, I love maple flavored straw, or I love
and it's not even the taste because you're not letting it go through, you're not giving the maple
that's
flavor
right.
in the mouth,
that's
you're
exactly,
in their stomach.
That's to try to get that through and then to realize, and none of this is conscious. As we were talking, it's nobody thinks about which enzymes to release to digest the food they're eating. And it's the same thing with these feedbacks. It's happening automatically. Yeah, and that's where if you're eating wholesome foods, it works. The system is as solid as can be. But if you get on the ultra processed, it gets hijacked. And people in the food industry have really learned how to do that well. And then to put not wholesome herbs and spices, let's say, as a flavoring agent, it's all these 600 million pounds a year or whatever.
Wait.
Artificial flavorings.
600 million pounds of artificial flavorings are added to our food every year.
Yeah.
That's frightening.
Yeah, it's
and it's caused this disconnect between our natural inclinations to eat foods that nourish us.
That's right.
With our ability to sort of pick those foods, and we tend to eat foods that are associated with these artificial flavors because they've scientifically figured out how to hijack our brain chemistry and our hormones and our metabolism. And so we tend to crave all the wrong stuff.
Rather than the phytochemicals we've been talking about, we use artificial flavoring agents. And so we're not getting, just as you were saying earlier, all those things that our bodies evolved with over the years and that regulate all these systems inside our body, we're not getting.
We're seeing like the really drop in nutrient levels in a lot of common foods that we eat. And what you're saying is not necessarily the lack of nutrients in the soil.
Correct.
But the lack of the live microbiome of the soil that is needed to extract the nutrients that feed the plants.
In some cases, there are some deficiencies in the soil of minerals, but in most cases, most things are there. And
so that's a problem. So we don't really understand the fact that it's really the fact that we've been killing the soil through the application of nitrogen fertilizers and various things like glyphosate, which is a soil microbiome killer, and by tillage, which damages the soil, that we're actually destroying the very nutrition that we need for our own health.
It's entirely perverse, and we will go extinct if we keep it up. So we have an opportunity, I think, to turn it around. What percentage of the Earth's landmass has been desertified through the practice of agriculture through the last 10,000 years? Something like 40%.
It's a lot.
40%.
40%. Yeah, it's a lot.
We have created deserts through killing soil and turning it into dirt and turning it into dust. We can create fecundity, vitality and amazing biodiversity in those, currently desertified areas if we do choose to work in harmony with life. But it's incumbent on us to make those choices. And so our thought is, strategically, most people are bothered with their own personal day-to-day lives much more than they are with, the greater dynamics of the world. And so, survival is it's real. So our thought is, if we can figure out some way to align the interests where your survival is correlated with the regeneration of the earth, then we actually have a reasonable chance of turning things around in short order. And so that's where it comes down to the nutrient density being a lever, is if we can help people say, choose the food that's going to make, reverse your chronic illness, keep your skin looking, young and supple, keep your libido up, whatever it is that you care about, right? For your physiological form, to a large degree, has to do with whether what you're building your body out of is any good. And most of what we're building our bodies out of is relatively quite poor. And so so
it seems like you're a doctor of the ecosystem, of a farm ecosystem, right? And I'm a doctor of the human ecosystem, but they're really connected. and most people don't understand how important the farm is to their own health. So can you talk about that connection?
Just because the label says organic or whatever on it doesn't mean that the ecosystem is functioning well where that was produced. And, your tongue will tell you, but your body will tell you also. It's life. Life is the dominant reality, I would suggest. And the more we're in tune with it and aligned with it, the more we're likely to flourish. And we can't treat life like it's a factory, like it's a reductionist, mechanistic system. I mean, we can, but then we kill it, and we're part of it. So, yeah, I don't know. I think we've covered that point.
It's a huge issue. So, if say this sounds good, so people go, well, I want to buy nutrient dense food from the farms that practice biological agriculture, regenerative agriculture, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
What are the challenges of doing that today?
Well, as I said initially, the first thing is we don't have a definition. So, people can make claims and say my stuff is nutrient dense, but then whatever, that'll be a fad for a couple of years. A bunch of people will use the label, and then people will realize it's just another fad, and we'll move on to the next fad. So, our thought was, there's a couple key pieces here in the strategy. One is, give people the ability to actually test for themselves and not have to trust a label or marketing. You're not allowed to take a bite of an apple at the grocery store or at the farmer's farm stand. But we can read what stars are made up of, light years away, with this thing called spectroscopy, which basically is every element or compound in chemistry has a vibration in physics. Zinc vibrates at a certain frequency and vitamin C vibrates at a certain frequency. And so that vibration is light. So if you can take a picture of Alpha Centauri and see what it's made up of, like we can see what percentage it is hydrogen, helium, etc. Why can't we take a picture of a carrot and see what it's made up of? So that's what we did. I've got our first generation little meter here. It's, nothing too fancy. It's 3D printed. It's got a little chipset inside, and it's got some, light flashings of light and readings of light right here. It's open source. It's simple. It's like an Apple II. It's not an iPhone. It's not really slick and fancy, but functionally, we've got a handheld, open source, consumer price point spectrometer that you can use to flash a light at food and get readings off of, and meaningful readings. So one thing is, like, can we give people the ability to tell for themselves and not have to trust some certification system or labeling system, et cetera? The second thing is, can we define the variation? Because when we give you a reading that says this carrot's in the 80th percentile or that one's in the 20th percentile, we want to have actually characterized the full variation within carrots. And then the third leg of the stool is correlating environmental conditions and management practices to nutritional variation. So, the last thing we want is for farmers to be told by their buyer, we don't want your stuff. We want, the fact that this is happening to cause the farmers to start changing their practices so that the buyers do keep purchasing it. And those who are focusing on volume, let their stuff not be bought. If there's going to be 30% food waste or 40% food waste, let the food that's wasted be the stuff that's of least nutritional value, and that, let money drive, a shift. Money drives anyways.
I mean, most farmers don't know the nutrient density of their food, right?
We don't have a definition for it. Nobody knows. We don't even know what nutrient density is.
And the question is, what has been the drop in nutrient density in our food? I mean, is there data on our fruits and vegetables or other foods we're eating, grains and beans, and their nutritional density and content 50 or 100 years ago compared to now? Do you have any sense of the drop that's happened?
I mean, yes. The USDA has done this, the British version of the USDA, the Japanese version, the German version, depending on which nutrient they're looking at and which crop they're looking at, it can be tens of percent, hundreds of percent decrease. But the thing is, how many actual nutrients matter? Is it just protein and calcium, or is it, B12 and polyphenols? And so what was documented 50 years ago or 100 years ago, maybe even they hadn't even identified these compounds yet, much less had assessments for them. So I like to sort of take the conversation away from the what was food 50 years ago and what is it now concept and say, there was a variation 50 years ago. People that were eating stuff from the farm that was grown well had access to stuff that was much better than what might have been in a grocery store. And that's exactly the same situation now. So there was no average carrot in 1950. There is no average carrot now. Every carrot stands on a continuum. The average on the continuum may be lower now than it was, but they're still exceptional and pretty good. And so let's think about finding, defining, sourcing, incentivizing people to grow better. We found variations right now in the past 3 years. We've studied 21 crops now, a bunch of fruits and vegetables and a couple of grains, some roots and leaves. And, when we were looking at things like calcium and potassium and zinc and iron, it was between 300 and 1800% was the variation. So
wow.
This leaf of spinach will have 3 times as much copper as that leaf of spinach, which would be 300%. Or it would have 18 times as much iron as that leaf of spinach. And those are elements, right? And then we looked at antioxidants and polyphenols, which are supposed to be health-giving compounds. And we found the variation was more like 75,000 to 200,000%. Literally,
okay, wait.
This
Stop
leaf of
there.
spinach has as many.
It turns out it's not different. It turns out that there's 25,000 different phytochemicals in the plant kingdom, and they are probably the more important compounds than the actual vitamins and minerals. And yet we haven't really been measuring them. What you're saying is there's a difference of 75,000 to 200,000%
variation. 75 to 1 to 200 to 1 is what that means. So literally, I think the biggest one we found was antioxidants spinach. It was 364.5 to 1. So literally, you eat this leaf of spinach on January 1st, and then you eat.
So it's not 200,000%. That's a crazy number, but yeah, that's huge. That's a 75,
which is
200 fold different. Yeah, that's incredible.
200,000% is 200 to 1. It is 200,000%. Yeah, it's 200 to 1 or 150 to 1, depending on which element, which compound.
Yeah, you're right. That's insane to think about. That's insane to think about. So literally, the food quality is that different.
That's the fact.
And
it's
so,
not 5 or 10%. The very
wow. That's staggering. And so, we're missing, even if we're eating, so I'm getting all my vitamins and minerals and my nutrients from the food I'm eating. That may not be true because I'm just eating whole foods. It may not be true. And still why people are deficient because it's how it was grown and where it was grown and what soil it was grown in and how the soil was taken care of, what the microbiome of the soil was, and all those conditions that determine the quality of the nutrients in the plant is so, so critical. And what's so exciting to me is that you've actually sort of gone ahead with the Real Food campaign and created an educational model and also a diagnostic model for food. It's almost like a tricorder for your vegetables, right? It's like Dr. Spock, beam it over the body and see what's going on. So how does this work? Tell us about the technology and what we find and what you're finding with these spectrometers, and are they available and people can use them? Or
Yeah. So I think I said it sort of broadly before, but the principle is called, the science is called spectroscopy, and it's a, many decades old science. And it's what astronomers use, among many other types of scientists, to identify things. And the basic principle, we were taught in school that, you go to chemistry class when you're in 10th grade and you go to physics class when you're in 11th grade or whatever it is. But actually everything, every atom, every compound is vibrating. So copper is a vibration, zinc is a vibration, vitamin C is a vibration from a physics perspective. From a chemistry perspective, it's a certain number of protons and neutrons and electrons. But either way, you can effectively see what something consists of by taking a picture of the light that vibrates, that comes off of it. And so that's what we're doing, is we're literally flashing a light at the carrot and taking a reading of the light that bounces back. And, based on what's in there, some things get, sort of don't bounce back, and some things bounce back really strongly. And you can effectively measure what something is based on that signature. And there's all different kinds of spectroscopy. There's, there's acoustic, there's, UV, there's visible, there's, infrared, there's, there's all kinds of different ways of doing this. And so, what we've got is a pretty simple one. We just literally is 10 LEDs flashing a light at the carrot and then taking a picture of the light that bounces back. And it's that simple. Like I said, this is an Apple II. It's like the first personal computer. Like, you had to be able to code to do anything with it, right? Like, it's rudimentary. It's not market ready. It's not mass producible like Slick. So, we released the first version of this, I think, in 2018, 2019, we started shipping. And, when you flashlight at the carrot, what it gave back to you on your smartphone screen was like a little, just the peaks and valleys on a graph. And so what we're releasing in June 1st is an update to it, which will now give you a red, yellow, green. So bottom 25%, middle 50%, top 25%. So that graph, which is nice but doesn't mean anything to you, is now, we've gotten enough data and calibrations and algorithms and things to convert it into, this is in the bottom 25% of carrots, or the bottom 25% of cucumbers. This is in the middle 50%. That's the middle and top 25%. So yeah, we're making progress. And part of what we're doing is we're pretty dogmatic about the fact that we think this all belongs in the commons. We really don't want it to be controlled by a company or anything like that. So, we're running 4 labs, across North America and Europe. We're, doing all kinds of, software build out and all kinds of other stuff. So
could it be an app that just goes on your iPhone and you take a picture with your iPhone?
Well, I'm saying take a picture, but you have to be able to take a picture in the right frequency range. And so
Right.
If the iPhone did build the right sensor, if Apple built the right sensor onto an iPhone, yes, it could be an app. And that is where we hope it will get.
Yeah.
But there has to be a market reason for Apple to put that sensor into their phone. So we start off with these, third generation instruments.
So can people get access to them now, or is it just sort of in beta?
Yeah, well, you can, if you go to our website, you can order one. They're $377, and we'll be shipping in June with the update that gives you the red, yellow, green on.
And what's the website?
Bionutrient.org.
Bionutrient.org. That's amazing. I think a lot of people are going to be interested in looking at what they're eating and seeing, gee, is this carrot, or is this broccoli, or is this, iceberg lettuce the same as the arugula? And it'd be fascinating to see. And it doesn't give you an absolute number, but it gives you a range of red,
yellow, green. Right now, that's
yellow and green. Right?
It's a process, and we are really trying not to make claims that we can't back up. And so, if you read the website, there's like all kinds of caveats and like, this is what it is, but this is what it's not. And but it's a process, and we think that the broader food movement, and from all the way from chefs and nutritionists to agronomists and growers, we think this is something that we could all come together around. We're not anti-GMO, we're not anti this or anti that. we're pro quality nutrition, and let's learn from each other what the best practices are and the techniques, and let those who are doing a good job be acknowledged for it and supported for it.
So tremendous. Yeah. I mean, the book I wrote recently called The Vegan Diet really had as its primary focus the idea that food is medicine,
Yeah.
and that quality matters above all else, because the nutrient density and quality of the food determines the quality of your health.
Yeah.
And it's something that if we sort of connect the dots on it, well, wait a minute, we're not just eating for energy or fuel or calories. We're actually eating to regulate our biology with the right nutrients, including all these phytochemicals.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool to think that there's a way to keep integrity in the system by, at the point of purchase, being able to look at your food,
Right.
check it out, and see whether or not it is all cracked up to be.
You can market all day long, but if people actually have these things, they can go and check, and they can, and I mean, that's the idea. Not that everybody will, but that people can. And our thought is then we can work with the supply chain, the retailers, the wholesalers, whoever else, and help them get these instruments, and so they can make claims and market it. Not everybody else has to have a meter, but if we have a standard that anybody can engage, an instrumentation set, and it's all open source, it's in the commons. It's not black boxed, basically, and that's the problem.
And you think that'll drive changes in the food supply chain, because when consumers have the power to understand the quality of food or lack of quality, they're going to drive demand for food grown a different way, processed in a different way, distributed in a different way, right?
That's the thesis or the hypothesis. If you've got, you can choose your Bunny Love or your Cal Organic or your Bolthouse Farm carrots at the grocery store, and one's a 20 and one's a 40 and one's an 80. You're going to choose a 20? I don't know.
That's
I don't
incredible.
think so. I think the one that's 20 will stay in
your product might scare a lot of people in the food industry, I think. Because they don't want you to know.
Give them an opportunity to be on the cutting edge. Anybody who wants to get on the cutting edge of this can. And when the infrastructure is in place, the data is collected, and the instruments are out there, people are going to be able to see if Stonyfield is better than Organic Valley or whatever.
Yeah.
And so there's an opportunity here for people that want to walk the talk, that have their climate claims and everything else, to get ahead of the curve, get involved in data collection, engage the process. I mean, there's all this talk about regenerative and soil carbon and climate, and all these big companies are making these pledges. Like, the best way to build soil carbon is with healthy plants. Full stop.
Yeah. Let's talk about the nutritional density of the food, and then we'll get into the whole contamination, chemicals, and risks and so forth, and some of the studies on that, because I think that there's really a question of, is it any better? Is it just more expensive? Okay, maybe there's a little less pesticides, but how much better is it really for you?
So in order to answer this question around nutrient density, let's turn our attention to the vegetable systems trial, which is one of the newest studies at Rodale Institute. We're in our fourth year, and this study is really serving to answer the question: is organic food truly worth the extra premium? Is it truly more nutritious? And this is the first study of its kind in the world that is where we literally have organically grown vegetables done in a regenerative way, grown side by side with conventionally grown vegetables, where we're literally applying herbicide and pesticides on certain plots. And over time, we're beginning to study the nutrient differences and the nutrient density uptake in either of those two systems. And would you believe that early data, in just 1 or 2 years, we've already seen a pretty dramatic difference in nutrient density, specifically in carrots. If you look at carotenoids in carrots, we're seeing a much higher percentage of phytonutrients in the regeneratively grown carrots. And so this is a study, again, that we hope to do for 40 more years, because you have to understand, doing research in agriculture, it takes time, and very few people want to commit time and money. The average PhD student going through their research at a university, they have 3 years to do science. Well, how do you speed up biology? We can't force nature. And so why Rodale Science is so unique is that we're committed to it, not just for years, but for decades. So if we're already beginning to find a stark difference in nutrient density of phytonutrients in carrots after 1 or 2 years, what are we going to see in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And so we're really excited about this work.
Now can you explain why? Why would organic carrots be better than regular conventional carrots? What's the science behind why there's more phytochemicals, more vitamins, more minerals? How did that happen?
Sure. Our hypothesis on that would go back to how we treat the soil. So soil health is really going to be foundational to the plant's ability to uptake nutrients. How we manage the soil, the type of cover crops that we use leading up to whatever cash crop is being planted, we can actually impact biology simply by what we plant in the off season as a cover crop. In addition, pesticides and herbicides are killing the microbiological life in that soil. So what our science is showing is that when you apply herbicides and pesticides, you're killing all the life in the soil. There's something like 10 billion microorganisms in just 1 teaspoon of healthy soil. So as we begin to decimate the microbiome of that soil by what we apply to it, or by how we treat it through too much tillage, by not establishing a cover crop, by not creating biodiversity in and around whatever we're growing, all those factors are what we believe are impacting the nutrient density of that food.
Yeah, and I think one thing people don't realize is that soil is not just a medium dirt to grow plants in, that it's actually alive, and that the life in the soil is what allows the plants to extract from the soil the nutrients that it needs to grow and flourish.
That's exactly right.
And certain things like glyphosate or Roundup, which is a weed killer, it's on 70% of our crops. We're going to talk a lot about that. But that actually is a mineral chelator, which means that it binds to minerals like manganese and selenium and magnesium, and it prevents these nutrients from being taken up by the plant. It also kills the mycorrhizal fungi, which are this sort of web of like fungi within the soil that are critical for the overall life and health of the soil, that allows so many of the nutrients to get taken up into the plants. So it's a really complex web of connections that drives these nutrient-dense results in these plants. And we see this in wild plants have far more nutrients than conventional plants. For example, if you take a wild crab apple, it's got way more phytonutrients than a regular apple. Or if you have dandelion greens versus iceberg lettuce, or if you have, a Peruvian wild potato compared to a Yukon, Idaho potato or something, they're very, very different levels of nutrient and phytonutrients. And so organic is also providing that. And I think regenerative goes even a step further.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's actually something called the shikimite pathway, which is the nutrient uptake system that is built into every plant. And the way Roundup is designed, Roundup is the chemical you just alluded to, it's ubiquitous in our food system. It literally stunts that shikimite pathway. So it literally inhibits the plant's ability to uptake nutrients. Now, how backward is that thinking?
Yeah.
That we would apply a chemical that literally inhibits the plant's ability to uptake nutrients.
And why it's so important is even if you're eating vegetables and you're trying to eat a plant-rich diet, if you're eating traditional food, you're actually getting far less nutrients than you did 50 years ago. We have far less levels of magnesium, zinc, all the incredible important nutrients that we need to function as human beings. We are depleted, and that's why we see massive nutritional deficiency. Yes, it's the junk food and the ultra processed food, but it's also the depletion of our soils, where your broccoli and your vegetables have 50% less minerals and nutrients than they did 50 years ago. And what you're saying is organic and regenerative organic actually help to correct that and help to rebuild the soils, which then helps the plants grow healthy, which then creates healthy humans. So this whole healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy humans is such an important, simple idea, but it's amazing how it's ignored. And our current agricultural system produces commodity crops that aren't nutrient dense. They're bred for starch, they're bred for yield, they're bred for being able to be used in industrial food products. They're not made to create healthy humans. And that is such an aha for me when you think, gee, if we can have one guiding principle in our entire federal policy and state and agricultural policies, it should be that quality is king. That the focus should be on the quality of the food and the nutrient density. And you can define quality in lots of different ways, particularly it's around nutrient density, whether it's phytonutrients or vitamins and minerals or other compounds that are really the things that give food its medicine. And we've literally bred all the medicine out of food. We've literally, when you think of like blue corn, Native American corn, how nutrient dense that is, how low in starch and sugar it is, and how many phytochemicals there are in there, and vitamins and minerals. And then when you take this, modern corn that we're eating, it's all bred out of there, and it's a great industrial product, but it's not something you'd want to be eating.
Yeah, can I tell you a quick story on that same line? So are you familiar with the Penn State Hershey Medical Center? I think it's I think they say it's one of the largest cancer research universities or institutions in the United States. They just happen to be located about 50 miles from our headquarters, and a couple of researchers inside of Penn State Hershey Medical caught wind of the study that we just embarked on. So about 2 years ago, they caught wind of the vegetable systems trial. At the same time, these researchers were studying in laboratories this particular amino acid called ergothioneine. Now, ergothioneine, they were isolating ergothioneine in Petri dishes in a laboratory and researching its ability to kill cancer cells. And by the way, the highest amounts of ergothioneine are found in purple potatoes. And what they were finding is that the ergothioneine was in some ways performing as effectively at killing cancer cells as chemotherapy, if not better, in Petri dishes in this isolated environment. So it led them to ask the question, well, where does ergothioneine come from? And they ultimately realized, oh, it's synthesized in the soil. And what their research showed is that we have essentially farmed out, we've so degraded the levels of ergothioneine in our soil since 1960 using industrial approaches to agriculture that you and I aren't getting it in our diet anymore. And so we're now doing a bolt-on study inside of the vegetable systems trial along with our partners at Penn State, and we're going to begin to do a soil to patient study looking at how we can actually impact cancer patients using food, which is so radical, but we've so depleted this one amino acid that these researchers, their hypothesis is that the reason certain cancer rates are going so high is because we literally don't have this amino acid in our diet anymore. So can you imagine if that's just one amino acid, how much more we don't know?
That's right. I mean, that's just one example of one compound in food that has profound effects. And when you think of all the things that we've lost, the biodiversity of our plants, I mean, we used to eat so many different plant species as hunter-gatherers, 800 different species of plants. Even 100 years ago, there were hundreds and hundreds of different apple species in America. Now there's just a handful, right? And the same with all these other fruits and vegetables. And I think that we've just kind of bred into these monosystems, even our modern tomatoes or our modern carrots. It's all these homogeneous foods that are bred for yield and shelf stability and storage, but have nothing to do with nutrient density. And I think that's really what Rodale's great accomplishment is to highlight that there is a way of farming that actually can create downstream benefits of producing more nutrient dense food that is actually scalable, that is better for farmers, it's better for the soil, it's better for even the environment and climate. So I want to talk a little bit about the idea of the problems with the chemicals in agriculture, because in the Power of the Plate you do talk about this, and there's been studies that come out and say, oh, there's no difference, if organic or not, and pesticides, what's the big deal? But there's been some recent studies that I've seen, and not necessarily from Rodale, but just large trials looking at organic versus non-organic dietary patterns and seeing reductions in cancer and other chronic illnesses. So, and it also, these are hormone disruptors, they're endocrine disruptors, they drive infertility, and many other issues. So can you talk a little bit about the distinguishing features between organic and conventional and these pesticides, and this controversy of organic not being really worth the money or not being really any different in terms of its pesticide or chemical content? I mean, the nutritional density, I think we've established, but this is the other argument against organic.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to look at data that is kind of showing sort of a before and after. Before the introduction of Roundup, pre-1975, our chronic illness rates were sort of tracking along almost like a flat. There was really not much of a curve. And then all of a sudden you see this dramatic inflection point around the year 1975 with the introduction of glyphosate of Roundup. That was the year it was patented. And all of a sudden we see autoimmune cancers and other chronic illnesses and diabetes and obesity just skyrocket. So it almost seems like there was like this smoking gun moment around the time of the introduction of this ubiquitous chemical. As well as the sort of, I think it was right around the time Earl Butz, he sort of his rally cry, which was to go big or go home. And so we saw this explosion in industrial agriculture concurrent with this explosion in chronic illness. And so,
although I would say that, there were a lot of factors going on at that time. So that correlating glyphosate with the chronic disease epidemic is interesting, but we have to be careful about drawing, causative ideas from correlations. So one of the other concerns is that some people think that the idea that organic foods are going to reduce your risk of cancer or healthier for you has really been debunked. But I think the data is far from clear on that. In fact, there are mounds of evidence that show that people who do eat organic foods, one, have lower levels of pesticides and chemicals in their urine, so their bodies have less of a burden of it. And two, there was a large study of 68,000 people published in JAMA Internal Medicine in 2019 that showed about a 25% reduction in people getting cancer for those who had higher levels of organic food in their diet. So I think that to think that these chemicals are not harmful when they're literally toxic in parts per billion is just kind of silly. And I think that the question really we should be asking ourselves is, how do we design an agricultural system that's good for the soil, that's good for the plants, that's good for the animals that we raise, that's good for humans, that's good for the environment, that's good for climate, that's good for the farmers? That's really what we should be asking.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. One of the best ways you can support this podcast is by leaving us a rating and review below. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. Hyman. Thanks for tuning into the Doctor's Pharmacy. I hope you're loving this podcast. It's one of my favorite things to do, and introducing you to all the experts that I know and I love and that I've learned so much from. And I want to tell you about something else I'm doing, which is called Mark's Picks. It's my weekly newsletter, and in it I share my favorite stuff, from foods to supplements to gadgets to tools to enhance your health. It's all the cool stuff that I use and that my team uses to optimize and enhance our health. And I'd love you to sign up for the weekly newsletter. I'll only send it to you once a week on Fridays. Nothing else, I promise. And all you have to do is go to drhyman.com/picks to sign up. That's drhyman.com/picks, P-I-C-K-S, and sign up for the newsletter. And I'll share with you my favorite stuff that I use to enhance my health and get healthier and better and live younger, longer.
Just a reminder that this podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you're looking for help in your journey, seek out a qualified medical practitioner. If you're looking for a functional medicine practitioner, you can visit ifm.org and search their Find a Practitioner database. It's important that you have someone in your corner who's trained, who's a licensed healthcare practitioner, and can help you make changes, especially when it comes to your health.